Believe on, get ready for Arcade Bookshop.
Welcome to Arcade Bookshop, your podcast about video games and their literary counterparts for all of you who love to play and to read. Thanks so much for listening and joining us today. I'm Bryce Yoli, and as always, I'm here with my pal and cousin-in-law, Caleb James. And today is a special episode because we're also joined by Jay Malone of the YouTube channel Square Pegs. Thanks for coming on, Jay.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, you're most well known now, I'd say, for your YouTube channel, right?
I think that's safe to say. Yeah, definitely.
So, on your channel, you both review games. You talk about the process of collecting video games. And I actually found out about you because of we started the podcast. I started looking into going to conventions like Cleveland Gaming Classic.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just looking at who was there, and I was looking through the YouTube personalities, and your channel in particular caught my eye. So I was excited to meet you, and I'll explain why in a little bit.
I would like to know why, because
yeah.
I'm always mystified as to why people are like, I love your show. I'm like, I'm just a dude talking in his basement, but thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'll jump to it. I feel like a lot of like video game channels, a lot of reviewers, collectors. For me, like I'm new into, both of us probably are new into the video game side of the internet. Really, I was off of social media for a few years. I never really dove into YouTube hard, but since we started this podcast up in the last year, we started. I at least started really trying to connect with more people in the industry, and see what was out there. So when I watch a lot of these channels, and this is no offense to anyone, but since I'm not really deep in the internet, the the personalities of everybody is a little much for me a lot of the time. Like, people just the video game field, I guess, people really, and I don't want to say geeky or be offensive, but people are really a little gung-ho and over the top, and what really caught me about yours is that you're super well spoken, you're calm. I told Caleb the other day, your videos for me are like raking sand.
Thank you.
It's an odd compliment.
I've now been compared to a Zen garden and a fireside chat. So this is awesome. I love this.
Yeah, I put your videos on while I'm working, because I listen to other video game podcasts throughout the day, but I just it doesn't even matter what you're talking about necessarily. I just you have that very level and calm and contained, what you want to talk about, and you don't really care, and you're not you're not over the top or anything. It's just it's a comforting thing to have during the day, during a work day.
It's a nice reprieve from the over the top gimmicks that a lot of channels put on just to get views and clicks.
It took me a while to get there. I won't lie. Early videos on the channel, after I got comfortable in front of a camera, because the earliest ones, I'm on the other side of a hostage negotiation trying to tell my family that I'm safe and that I'm being fed. But the ones that probably after about 6 months of making videos, I was very much chasing this is what everyone else is doing, so this is what I need to do. And they were ridiculously inauthentic. They weren't getting views. No one cared. And then I did a video called Tales of an Industry Nobody. I used to work in the game industry. I was there for just about 7 years. And I decided to let myself be me instead of trying to be the persona that I was trying to fulfill at that time. And the reaction was immediate. And it was people were interested in the fact that I was an actual person and I wasn't just a YouTuber. And that really spoke to me. And the channel growth since then has been, I don't want to say it's been astronomical. I think it's been steady. There hasn't been a negative month since that time. And it's been really nice to have people come up to me at a convention and say, you know, I watch your videos because it's like having a conversation with a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's I don't have to worry about my kids watching your videos because you're family friendly. And I laugh at, you know, when they say that. I was like, oh, you don't see the outtakes. But you know, it was a conscious decision to make something that I would feel comfortable with my kid watching and other people's kids watching, because I didn't want to, for one, I didn't want to lose out on the monetization option, because I mean, it is a hobby, but sure, I do like getting money for what I do. But the other side was, it's like, I want to have something that is left behind that I can point at and be proud of when I'm done. And I think I'm there. Like it's been a long 4 years working on the channel, but it's been the last year I think has been really incredible. Like going to Cleveland, I was a guest there. I was a guest in Columbus for two different shows this year. I was a guest at Southeast Game Exchange in South Carolina. So the growth is there, and it's been really nice. And getting to do stuff like this is great. This is like the third podcast I've done this week, which is so strange to me.
Nice.
Because it was literally, it's feast or famine. Like there was nary an invite, and then we started talking, and then it was like, hey, do you want to do a podcast on Monday? I was like, yeah, sure, why not? We can bookend the week. And then it was, hey, do you want to do it on Wednesday too? I was like, good Lord, what is happening? But I was really intrigued by, because we met at Cleveland. This is the first time I'd heard about you guys. And I loved the concept. I was so just intrigued. It's like, I don't know if you've seen some, I did a series early in the channel when I was first kind of discovering who I was, because I was raised by a college professor. My mom is an archaeology and anthropology major.
Oh, cool.
So there was always books in our house, and always like heavy books. Nothing like, it was, sure, we had Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, but there was also, you know, the 12th guide to anthropology this year or whatever. And it was like, okay. But it was one of the series I did early in my channel was I tried to equate RPGs to the hero's journey, and going through the different steps of the hero's journey and trying to explain it that way. And I didn't get any reaction on it. It ended up being a lot more work than it was worth pursuing at the time. And then, you know, you introducing yourself to me and looking into the show a little bit. And I remember I was talking to my friend Chris, who was sitting with me at the show, and I was like, this is so cool. This is such a great idea. Like equating books and arcade games or just video games together is brilliant. This is the kind of stuff that excites me, because it's different. It's not the same spiel over and over and over again, which I'm very much guilty of. In, you know, I do the same things over and over again, but hearing something new and hearing what makes you guys click. And I love seeing the Instagram shorts you guys are doing and the reels you guys do, which are, you know, a little bit more playful and stuff like that. I think it's just fantastic. So, I guess I kind of turned that around to saying thank you for having me on something I think is really cool. So it's,
well, I mean, yeah, thank you, because sometimes, you know, I think especially nowadays, it's just really hard getting started.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like, I mean, from what Caleb has told me, because he has a podcast as well, called the Drunken Pen Writing Podcast. He started his before COVID, but I guess during COVID, like there was an explosion of podcasts and channels and stuff. So you're really like diluted when you start something nowadays. Oh, yeah. And, you know, we get some regular listeners, but it's definitely a challenge. And, you know, I really believe it's a good idea. So it's comforting and validating to hear someone like you tell me that you like it so much, because, you know, I haven't heard it a lot yet. And it makes you question yourself, you know, like you're doing this for like a year, 8 months or whatever. And, you know, pumping out that social media stuff, and you're like, is it even worth it? Yeah.
It won't feel like it is. I'll tell you that. It's a very, the content creation is a cruel mistress, because you have these ideas, and they're sound ideas, and they're good ideas, and people will tell you that they're good ideas, but you're not getting the audience that you think you should be getting because of people saying that. And there were plenty of times that I wanted to stop, just because I didn't think it was worth my time, worth my effort. And you mentioned COVID. COVID's exactly what happened to me. I started the channel in 2019 and then gave up on it like immediately. I did 2 videos. I was like, nope, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And then the world shut down. And I was like, well, I guess I can do this thing again and talk about video games on the internet because I can't go talk to my friends about video games anymore. It took me, gosh, probably 2 years to get to the point where I was getting any kind of traction on what I was doing. And that's any kind of traction. Like I was, 100 views on a video was, time to pop the champagne.
Yeah.
And it's I used to play hockey when I was younger, and it was something, my grandfather imparted on me was, just because you have a talent doesn't mean people are going to see it. You have to keep working at it to make sure that people, you have to be undeniable. And that's stuck with me because I knew when I found my voice, and I can say this for you guys as well, you found something special, and it's going to be real easy to be tempted to stop, because if the audience isn't there, what's the point? That's just natural human reaction. Why wouldn't we do that? But if you push through it, eventually someone's going to notice. And you guys have had some magazine coverage in Pittsburgh, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, we had one. We were in like a top 10 new podcast thing early on.
That's more than me. So it's something where, the other side of the content creation isn't just making the content, it's also marketing the show, like you said, doing the stuff on social media, but reaching out to local shows and stuff like that. Reaching out. Pittsburgh Game Expo is in your area. It's a phenomenal show. Brian's a great guy that runs it. And yeah, I think, being local boys, reach out, shoot them a message and get on a website, it gets eyes on it, just like you discovered me. It's going to put someone onto the show, and all it takes is one person saying, this show's really cool, you guys should listen to this, and then it's going to spiral. So
well, I appreciate that. It's actually relevant that you say that, because we, like, this weekend, or the past couple of days, actually, we've been and I have something to get back to you in a minute, but while we're on the topic, the last couple of days we've been like tossing around the idea of actually going to CGC this year. Okay. And I think it's not the investment I can make right now, just because it involves, lodging and food and gas and all of that in addition to the table costs. But we had to like talk about like what we're actually doing and what investments are worth it and what aren't. But I did decide that overall, I do want to do events. I think I'm just not ready to like actually like, travel to one. But yeah, I'm looking at Pittsburgh Gaming Expo. And I also applied to the Three Rivers Comic-Con in Pittsburgh. Yeah. So as long as the tables are still available, we should be at that one.
That's awesome.
And I was gonna sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, getting yourself out there, especially locally, is huge. Like it's I don't have that option here. Here I'm in Kalamazoo, Michigan. We have nothing. We have a traveling version of the Grand Rapids Comic-Con that sort of comes around once a year. And I say sort of because they were supposed to be here a couple of times and they decided not to. So it's there's one retro game shop. There's no conventions, no expos. So for me, it's travel or nothing. So if you've got that option to do something local, by all means, embrace it, take it. Like,
exactly.
Do you know who John Riggs is?
I don't.
Okay. So he's a retro game creator as well on YouTube. He's a mentor. John's an incredible guy. And one of the things he always stressed to me was, don't ignore the smaller shows or the local shows, because that is your backbone. That's your bread and butter. Because supporting them, they're going to remember it. The big shows aren't necessarily going to remember that you were there the year before, but something like a show that's in your backyard where you can help promote the show on your show or talk about the show to people that locally that are going to buy a ticket. That's so much more impactful than we brought in random YouTube guy. Like, who cares about that? Like, all my stuff that I go to is within a 4-hour driving distance for me, because it's that's what I have to do. I don't really have a choice. And that's when I say I'm local, that's what I mean. Is like, Columbus, Ohio is not local to me whatsoever, but it's as good as I'm going to get right now. So, helping out those local shows is a big deal.
Yeah. So like, when it comes to these shows, like the conventions and stuff, what do you think it is that you get out of them? And like, is there a way that you make sure that you give back when you go to them?
So that's a great question. So I've been on both sides of a convention. I used to volunteer at them down in Florida when I lived down there. And now as a guest, which is an entirely different side of operations. It's bizarre. But the main thing, and I'm going to answer the second half before I answer the first half. The main thing that I think is responsibility, and you have to do as a guest, and something I got kind of made conscious of at Cleveland. Talking to Tom, who's the guy who runs the Cleveland Gaming Classic, was it's fine if you leave your table. It's fine if you get up and walk away. Just leave a note when you're going to be back. Just so people have an expectation, because you're part of the attraction. You're part of the reason people are coming to the show. And it didn't, that never clicked in my head that was a thing I should be doing. I was like, oh, well, that's just common courtesy. Of course I should be doing that. So for me, it's making sure that I'm available to the show for whatever they need, because if they're having me in as a guest, that means I'm working for them for that weekend and leading up to it. I'm going to promote the show. I'm going to talk about being there. I'm going to put the show up on social media. I'm going to give links. I'm going to talk about ticket prices, the whole thing. When I'm at the show, I am there to meet guests. I am there to go shopping and meet vendors. I am there to film content. I am there to cover it. I'm there to interview the show host, to make sure that they have a face out there as well, because so often they go nameless and faceless, and that's kind of unfortunate, because it's really a thankless job running a convention. So to me, that's my responsibility, is making sure that the show is covered in the best light it possibly can be. Now, if I'm just there attending the show, I don't film anything, because I'm there to have fun for myself. That's not going to happen every time. Like I didn't film in Pittsburgh because I was only there for a day. We were there with some friends that are in town. And I think we were only there for like 2 hours. So it wasn't going to make any sense for me to film. But like when I go to Midwest Gaming Classic in April, which is the first show I'm doing this year, I'll probably take an entire day filming, just walking up and down aisles, looking through the vendors, buying stuff, interviewing people, talking to other guests, stuff like that. But the main thing I get out of it, aside from the opportunity to collect some stuff, because like I said, I don't have that opportunity here locally. There's nothing here. So from a stuff perspective, that's great, because I can add to the goblin horde behind me. But the main thing I get out of it is, one, meeting people that care about the show, which is always gratifying and incredible. There was a show last year, and I can't remember which one it was, but seeing someone randomly that wasn't there to talk to me, I was just walking through the aisles and seeing them in a Square Pegs hoodie. Like I was cloud 9 high for the rest of the day.
That'd be so cool.
Oh, it was amazing. It was absolutely incredible. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, this guy's wearing my stuff. And he didn't come here to look what I'm wearing. He's just looking at a booth. And I was like, that's so cool. But the other side of it is, there's a really, and it's interesting because it can frequently be such a toxic hobby, but there's such a positive community around retro gaming at the retro gaming expos. Now, you're going to have your jerks at the shows. That's every place. You're going to have a massive humanity. There's going to be someone there that's just not cool. But getting to meet people that are excited about the same thing you're excited about is just an instant icebreaker. You don't have to worry about saying something that people are going to judge you for being a geek or a nerd or something like that. You instantly have that connection, whether it's a 12-year-old kid who's excited about playing Smash Ultimate at the free play area to the 48-year-old guy who's looking for Atari 2600 cartridges. We share that love of video games, and being able to see them and talk to them and celebrate this hobby, and see my friends, my fellow content creators who live all over the, earth in some cases. But, I know so many people out on the West Coast that I only get to see once or twice a year.
Yeah.
And it's at these shows. So it's, going out to dinner with them, going to a movie with them before the show starts or anything like that. It's just, that's the stuff I remember. Like the pickups are secondary. It's the friendships and talking to people and just the hangout. That's the best part.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I hadn't thought of like making sure the host is seen and all that. So I'm glad you said that because that's something I can think about when I go out there now. Um, it's something that I have I have no idea what my booth will look like when I do it. I'd like to do something that's both like engaging and like respectful for everyone that's coming by and for the for the host and everything. And but yeah, that gives me something to think about. Like, maybe that, I can actually, like you said, you cover the show and you don't have to do that. And
No,
that's
you
another
don't.
reason I like you.
It's to me, it's one of those things that I think is my responsibility at that point. If they're paying to have me out, if they're giving me a hotel room, it's quite literally the least I can do. This is a hobby. They're just having me do my hobby. They're just paying me to do it, which is super weird, but I'm happy to be there, and it's one of those things where, I've met some really incredible people doing shows and going to expos and stuff like that. And a lot of times organizers will be like, no, I don't want to be on camera. I don't need to be on camera. It's fine. But there are certain times where you'll talk to them and just be like, just 5 minutes. Let me ask you some questions about the history of the show and we'll go from there. And they're like, yeah, you know what? Actually, that sounds pretty cool. And they're on there. And I've had people comment on stuff. It's like, I had no idea Gary ran Corgs. I've never spoken to him before. Been going to the show for 10 years and I had no idea this was the organizer. It's like, oh, now you do. So it's stuff like that I think it's important. And for me, like having me at a show is it's obviously it's cool. Like it's great for me. I love it. But if they think that I'm important enough to have there, then the least I can do is show them the same courtesy that they're important enough to be on camera to feature them.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. And I want to loop back to something you said earlier about just how you like to run your show. And it's kind of, it's kind of silly, but it's also significant. The fact that you want to make your channel like family friendly and you don't swear an abundant amount, stuff like that. That's the kind of thing that I notice. And it adds to that like Zen quality. But like I noticed that in any show that I listen to, because I would say most podcasts at least are vulgar, including like us included. Like we swear a lot. And it's something I'm always like, it's I go back and forth on because I would like to be able to be open to as many people as possible as well. I would just completely accessible. But at the same time, like my authenticity is that I swear a lot. And so it's like a battle because I don't like to be heard that way, but I also talk that way, especially when I get enthusiastic about something.
I am very much the same way. My mom was, like I said, she was a college professor, but I was primarily raised by my grandparents. My grandfather was a Navy man in World War II. I heard a few words in my life. So I swear constantly. Like it is just one word after another in most regards. It's just one of those things that when the camera goes on, it goes off. And it's not really a conscious thing. It was just kind of, and it's one of the things that has stuck in the ADHD brain was one of the few things that sticks up there is when I started the show, I said, you know what? There's so many people that just go all over go completely blue in their videos and they're all over the map of their language. I want to make sure I'm not. And that stuck. Now that slips sometimes. Like I use the Diet Coke swears, like hell and damn are fine. Those don't bother me at all. But anytime you hear Wario go wow or anything like that in the show, that's me slipping up because I didn't catch it until the edit, and it's like, oh shit, damn it! All right, I need to catch that. I need to get that covered. So it's there'll be, I'll flash a Wario face up on screen so you can't see my mouth or anything like that. It's silly, but it's one of those things where it's important to me. It's important enough to me that I can suggest the show to anyone.
Yeah.
because I know other shows that I've done in the past that has not been the case, where it's been kind of like, oh yeah, no, I do a podcast. I can't tell you what it is though. I don't want anyone listening to this. So
yeah, well, you never know. Like it's actually surprising to me to hear that that's your like typical.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm filthy. You should see the text messages.
That's hilarious. Well, I'm really interested to hear more about your like you said you were into like development before, right? Game development.
I was in game QA. So I was
Okay.
I started as a tester. I was hired as a temporary employee at Electronic Arts Tiburon in Orlando, Florida. I was hired on March 10th, 2003. That is my wife's birthday. That's the only reason that date sticks out to me. It's because it was my wife's birthday. It's like, hey, happy birthday to you. I got a job. I was a telemarketer at the time for Scholastic books. So I used to call up grandmas and try to sell them Captain Underpants books and get yelled at. Because they were vulgar, filthy books. And I was like,
of course,
they're fucking great. Captain Underpants rules. I got the job at EA, and it was, you're going to be here for 6 months and that's it. That's all we have space for. We don't do permanent conversions. You're going to be here 6 months and then you're done. So I went in just saying, it's a 6-month break from being a telemarketer. And that's all I need right now. I just need something to get my soul back from selling books. And I started, and the first thing I worked on was NCAA football 2004 for the Nintendo GameCube. The one thing I said I wanted to do, I'd wanted to work in video games since I was a kid. I got an issue of Nintendo Power, and there was a graph paper drawing of one of the levels of Mega Man 2 in it from the developer on Mega Man 2. And I said, I'm going to do that someday. And when I found out about the opportunity to work there, I was like, well, you don't get to knock a childhood dream off the bucket list every day. So yeah, let's go for it. And the first thing I worked on was NCAA 2004. I said I wanted to work on a Nintendo product. If that was all I ever did in the industry, that was enough. I was happy. And then 7 years later, I delivered about 30 games. I worked on everything from football titles to I worked on Mirror's Edge on the Xbox 360. I worked on a game called Henry Hatsworth and the Puzzling Adventure on the Nintendo DS, which is the thing I'm most proud of in my time in the industry. And it was an incredible experience, and it gave me an insight into the industry that I don't necessarily think a lot of people have, because I got to see it from the lowest of the low. I mean, it's if you haven't worked in video game development, and this is specific to the early 2000s to 2010, QA was not really thought of as part of the team. We were them. It was us versus them, and to development we were them. We weren't in the same building. We weren't invited to the dinners. We weren't given a budget for food. Like none of this stuff. And we're working the same hours they are, sometimes longer. So it was in many cases a thankless job, but it led to a career. I still do software QA to this day. I don't do video games anymore. I work in library software. It's significantly less boring, or significantly more boring, but significantly less time consuming. And it's something where that experience I took from that job has made me appreciate things a lot more. The first 9 months of my son's life, I didn't see him, because I was working every day for probably 8 of those 9 months. I was working, trying to deliver games, and that was hard. And when I got laid off, it was one of those things where I was convinced my world was over, that everything was done. And it was probably the best thing that's ever happened to me, because it gave me more time with my kid, more time with my wife. It made me realize the things about the job that I really loved that I could keep doing, just not necessarily in video games. And it brought me to the biggest creative thing I've ever done in my life, which is my channel. Because if I didn't have that background, I don't think I would have ever started. It was, one of the things that I make a conscious effort to do with my show is that I try to look at things from a developer's perspective, or from the industry side of things, as opposed to just the fanboy side of things. I do plenty of fanboy stuff, And I'm very much guilty of that because I was a fan before I was, before I worked on anything. But a lot of times, like, people will say, it's like, this is ridiculous. There's so many bugs. There's so many bugs. There's so many bugs. It's like, well, you're right. It is ridiculous that there's so many bugs, but you're also thinking that there's an infinite amount of time to work on a game. Like, we would develop and deliver one of our sports titles in 9 months. From soup to nuts, like initial concept to pressing the gold discs, 9 months.
Wow.
Which is an insanely fast amount of time.
Yeah.
And granted, you can look at it and say, well, you're starting with an established code base, you blah, 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 blah. That's true. We were. That's accurate. We weren't starting from scratch. We were starting from something that was already built, but there were so many nuance-based changes and so many minor things that most people wouldn't even recognize as being a shift in what the code was or what the physics engine was. Like, I don't think people realized how much physics change and engines change every year when you're creating something. When we made the transition from the Xbox, PS2, and GameCube generation to the PS3 and the Xbox 360, that was the year we worked on NASCAR 08. And we didn't have test kits. We had 12 test kits in the entire building, and that went to Madden because Madden made the money. And rightfully so. It should have gone to Madden, but we were an afterthought. We didn't get testing kits until probably about 8 weeks out from finishing the game. So it was a mad scramble to get the game tested. The physics engine was completely broken, where cars would fly in the sky. We promised that we would have a full field of racers online, which, if I remember correctly, it's been a long time since I've watched NASCAR, but I think it's 41 or 42 drivers. So we said we were going to have 42 independent drivers online, that you were going to be able to have a full field of racing. We shipped with 16 because it was impossible. And it was just one of those things where it got panned in reviews, and it should have gotten panned in reviews. It wasn't a great game, but the fact that it got released at all
is kind of amazing.
A minor miracle. Like, it's because it was one of those things where, we're 3 weeks out from our drop dead date, and I'm like, there's no fucking way this thing's going to release. We're not going to get this done. And in 3 weeks, it turned around to the point where it was at least playable. And I'm like, fuck it, we're done. Go. Just release it. We're fine. And it is, to this day, the worst rated game I ever worked on. And it should be, but it finished. So it was, it was something that I was very proud of the fact that we at least finished the game. So,
right.
It's like working in food service or retail. People don't appreciate what goes into it unless you do it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like I worked in cafes my teenage years. That was my thing, because it gave me time to go play hockey. I could, go work in a cafe in the morning, and I could play hockey all night. So, like, I firmly believe that everyone should have a retail or a service industry job at least once in their life to appreciate the amount of garbage you give to servers. Because, like, if your server sucks, that's one thing. But if you're just having a bad day and you're taking it out on your server, don't be an asshole. Come on. Like, it's not right. It's just not right.
So when it comes to, I'm interested in your perspective on this, since you're in QA. When it comes to games that are released with a lot of bugs, like the big one obviously was the Cyberpunk game. What are your feelings on that?
My feelings on Cyberpunk was that was inevitable. When Cyberpunk got announced and they showed off what it was going to be, and it's an open world, and it's a massive world, and there's persistent changes as you're playing. I was like, oh, that's going to be riddled with bugs. That's going to be an absolute just dumpster fire of bugs. It was. And then I think like 2 months before release, they're like, yeah, we're going to do PS5 and Series X upgrades. I was like, oh yeah, no, you're not. And they didn't. But it was one of those things where I looked at it and I go, this needed another year to bake. It needed one more year to bake. And unfortunately, you don't really get that option when it's a licensed game. If that was a completely independent IP that wasn't reliant on anything else, I'm pretty sure they could have said, you know what, this isn't ready. We're going to kick it back a year. And people would have been like, oh, that sucks. But they'd have forgotten about it when this unbelievable game that it is now released.
Right.
It would have been like, oh, all is forgiven. That's fantastic. Miyamoto said A delayed game is eventually good. A bad game is bad forever. That's accurate. It's something where when you're dealing with that, because the Cyberpunk 2077 is a license. I think it was a role playing game originally, like a pen and paper RPG. So when you're dealing with that license, you have a responsibility to the licensee that you are going to deliver it on time, on your contractual obligation, under the objectives that they set forth. We used to deal with that with the NFL. There was a year where we released, or we said that in our contract we were going to release like 5 NFL games, and that was all fine and dandy when we were doing stuff like Madden and NFL Street and NFL Street 2 and some other stuff. That was great. And then we got to the PS3 generation. We're like, all we have is Madden. All right, so we're going to put out 3 fantasy football SKUs, none of which are actually fantasy football related. Yeah, I worked on that. And we're going to count those, and the NFL is going to be happy. And I'm like, okay, if the NFL is happy with their $1 billion contract, then I guess I'm happy too. But yeah, it's one of those things where when you have that license that's responsible to be fulfilled, you're going to have bugs shipped. It's just the way it is. And I don't think people recognize how many bugs are typically found in a game. Like, I can't imagine the bug database in something like a Witcher 3 or a Grand Theft Auto 6 or something like that. Like on Madden, we would find 15 to 20,000 bugs.
Wow.
They've got to be in the hundreds of thousands at that point. And when you're talking about that volume of churn and code change and fixes and like necessary implementation of things, stuff's going to get missed. Stuff's going to get swept under the rug. We had a bug status at EA called known shippable. We're like, yeah, that's a bug. Too bad. It's good. We're going to live with it. You know, it is what it is. And if someone doesn't like it, then we'll fix it next year, because this is before patches.
Oh yeah.
So it's one of those things where whenever I see those massive games announced, I'm always like, it's going to be buggy. It's going to be a mess. I mean, I am as guilty as anybody of not liking constant title updates that we get today, and constant, day one patches and stuff like that. Oh, the game isn't complete. Why are we getting a day one patch? The complexity and just the overall size of games now, like even a sports title, is massive. It's absolutely massive how big those games are. It's just the nature of the beast. Software development happens all the time. Like I don't think people realize how many changes go into a website every day, with bug fixes and stuff like that just going on a regular, like ESPN.com probably goes through 5 or 6 iterations a day of getting bugs fixed and deployed. So
crazy.
I mean, we've been rushing through these games since like the ET debacle, we just always have the games that have to come out. They have to come out. We will kill the developers, and at least now they can patch them. But the old days it was rough because it comes out. That's it. That's what you got.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
terrible
if it didn't
product
work,
goes right in the garbage, and it's costs. That's the thing people always forget too. These retro games, they cost like $60. Like old Nintendo games, they were like $60 in 90s money. So
yeah,
it's a lot.
I the first game I ever bought with my own money was Super Mario Brothers 2 on the NES, and it was something where I saved up for like literally a year, saving my $3 a week allowance to have my $60 to buy Super Mario Brothers 2, and I was happy to pay it. Like, I was so excited to get home. Like, I must have read the instruction manual 30 times on the drive home from Toys R Us. It was like, I don't bat an eye spending 60 or 70 bucks on a game now. It's like, oh yeah, well, okay, that's the price of the hobby. That's what it is.
Now imagine the poor kid back then who saved up for a year and he got Karate Kid.
Seriously. Seriously. That's exactly right. Yes. Like, the poor bastard that bought X-Men or Silver Surfer, like, just
relentless.
Oh, the worst.
But then in terms of patches, it is nice that they can do that now, because I mean, I haven't played it, but Cyberpunk is now a good game, right?
Oh yeah, from what I understand. I haven't played it either. It's just not something that really interested me. But
yeah,
like my friend Matt plays it, and when it released, he was like, I can get through it. I can play it, but I'm tolerating it because I'm a fan of the pen and paper game. Okay. I was like, okay, that's fine. I can understand that. But he brought it up a couple of weeks ago. He's like, it's legitimately the best game I've played in years now, because of the constant updates and the constant fixes they've been doing. It's like, that's awesome. That's a perfect way to look at what title updates and what patches can do for a title. That's huge and fantastic.
But at the same time, if they waited and just put it out proper the first time, it would probably be considered an all-time classic.
Yes.
Because people if it comes out buggy, doesn't matter how well it does later on, people just view it in a poor light usually.
Oh, people still make No Man's Sky jokes.
I know. And I always wanted to play that game. I never got around to it, but yeah, the original release, it's like, it was such a lofty premise that they weren't going to, there was no way they were going to live up to it.
Yeah.
And then people were rightfully disappointed, but then they just, after all the patches and stuff and upgrades, it's like, you can go back and play it now. It's probably a lot better.
Yep. But no one's going to.
Nope.
Which sucks.
On the other side, a recent game that I've been playing that I actually have noticed how there is, I haven't noticed a single thing wrong with it. Granted, it's a simpler game, but Sea of Stars is incredibly impressive to me.
I love Sea of Stars so much. so much. It was like legitimately until Mario Wonder and Spider-Man 2 came out, it was that and Baldur's Gate 3 neck and neck for my game of the year last year. There isn't a single thing about that game I don't like.
Yeah.
The look is fantastic. The story is great. I love that it ties into the Messenger. Have you guys played that?
I haven't.
I downloaded it. I'm still
too.
playing Sea of Stars, so once I beat that, I'm gonna go to the Messenger.
It's so good. If you like Ninja Gaiden, it's so good. It's fantastic. And they tie together loosely, but also very directly. It's interesting the way they did it. Because there will be story beats where you're gonna in the Messenger where you're gonna be like, that's what they were talking about. That's what they were referencing. But I would agree. Sea of Stars is a perfect example of how to do a game. They announced that like 3 years ago. And their entire opinion of it was it'll be done when it's done.
Right.
And say what you will about Blizzard, and there's plenty of things you can say about Blizzard. Their theory and their initial like kind of motto and way that they worked was, when it ships is when it ships. We're not going to put a release date on something until we know it's done. And now they've done away with that because everyone can look at Overwatch 2 and see what they've done. But like back in their World of Warcraft days, it was when they announced an expansion, or when they announced a new version of StarCraft or a new version of Warcraft, it was because they knew that they could hit that release date, because the game was essentially done at that point and it was just minor fixes. And that was a huge thing of reliability, and why they got so much goodwill with the community was because they put out quality. They don't anymore, but they also got bought by Activision. So
if you allow me a minor digression here,
sure.
What is your opinion? Because you mentioned Messenger is similar to Ninja Gaiden. What is your opinion on the difficulty level of games now compared? Because like Ninja Gaiden was one of those ones, relentless. I mean, the original trilogy is one of the hardest. Like if you beat that, especially as a kid, that's like the all-time accomplishment. I mean, now you have speedrunners just flying through it ridiculously, doing all the glitches and everything. But how do you feel about modern games? Because we were talking off air about Sea of Stars. My only gripe with the game so far is just it's not challenging enough.
I would agree with that. I do that is probably my biggest problem with Sea of Stars as well, is that it is fairly easy in the grand scheme of things. I'm very much there for the story, not for a challenging gameplay experience. My opinion though on game difficulty is probably 4 years ago I'd have been very much on board with the games are very easy now. But I am getting older. I am now in my mid 40s and I'm getting much worse at games. My hand-eye coordination is starting to slow down. So games are getting that challenge back. But I do think that's more indicative of my age and not necessarily the actual difficulty of the title. And there's certain games, and I'm trying to think of the best way to word this. I really think it's going to depend on what game it is, because there are certain games where I'll just pick up and be like, oh, boop, 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 there we go. That's easy. I can figure that out. But then I'll watch my wife pick something up that I'm struggling with and pulling my hair out and yelling at the TV about, and she'll go through it in 30 seconds. I'm like, how did you do that? She's like, it's simple. You just follow the pattern. I'm like, what pattern? There's nothing there. It's chaos. Yeah. But like I'm of the opinion like I said, I'm older now. I play games for fun. I don't play on hard anymore. I'm a normal or easy game player. I am there to just have a good time and get through the game and enjoy myself.
No, the one thing I do appreciate about Sea of Stars is I'm able to just to play. Like, I'm not slamming my controller. I'm not losing constantly to the same boss. So I can actually, because I don't have we're older. We don't have a lot of time to invest in games anymore. At least, most of us. So when you're able to just play once through, and maybe you die a couple times, but it's medium challenge is fine for me. Like I said, my only complaint was it wasn't difficult enough, though they do have adjusters on the game, so you can make it a little more challenging and, lower your life bar, things like that. But when it comes to platformers and things like Ninja Gaiden, you go into those kind of knowing they're supposed to be difficult. So if you like The Messenger, I haven't played it yet, so I don't know how difficult it is. I'm assuming it's a lot easier or at least more playable, because a lot of the NES titles, a lot of the difficulty was just in the controls or lack thereof.
Very much so.
That's like a cheap difficulty. So when modern games have the adjusters, though, I do like that, because then you can adjust it to, hey, I want a challenge today, but maybe next time I play this, I want it to just be a normal playthrough. So that's like the one benefit of the modern technology, is we can do that. And then that also brings in more gamers, because if you have an older person or a kid, they want to play a game. If it's too difficult, they're just going to quit. But if they can adjust it to their level, then they can have fun with it. And I think that's the most important thing, is accessibility. Everyone should be able to have fun with video games.
Absolutely. And that's the ultimate yes right there, because games are for everyone and everyone should be able to play. That was one of my favorite things about Spider-Man 2. Was exactly what you said. There were some days where I'm like, you know what, I'm ready. Let's bump this up to amazing difficulty. I'm going to go in and have some good fights, and it's going to be challenging, and I'm going to enjoy it. And then there's days where I'm just like, nope. I just want to swing around New York, get in a couple fights, and just relax. Like, and that was a huge win for me, because I could adjust it on the fly and do what I wanted. And it's one of the reasons it was my favorite game last year, was because it could tailor itself to where I was at mentally that day.
Right.
Well, that brings around to your original topic of some people in the retro gaming sphere are more the toxic fan base, which you have with every fan base. And that's like the gatekeepers, where it's, well, you didn't play it on this difficulty, so you don't count. You didn't beat the game because you didn't play it on max difficulty. And I always laugh at those. It's like, I play for fun. I don't want to pull my hair out and throw a brick through my TV.
It's a game at the end of the day. Like, that's it's in the word. It's a video game. It's supposed to be fun. And if it's too difficult for me to have fun, then why am I going to play it? Like, I've never beaten Ninja Gaiden. I don't actually know that I've ever gotten through the 3rd level of Ninja Gaiden, even as a kid. It was just one of those games where it's like, nope, put the controller down. I'm pissed off. I don't want to play anymore. And yeah, it's one of those things where I want to be able to enjoy my time with a video game. And there's plenty of those NES games, those NES hard games, where it's an unenjoyable experience. One of the nice things about the Messenger is it is, like you mentioned, though, because one of Ninja Gaiden's biggest issues was you're using essentially a brick with 2 buttons on it to to get through this. And the Messenger's controls are significantly better, and there's different things that you can get that'll give you a slower falling speed or things like that you can use to move you through the level a little bit more easily. So it's a lot
more fun. Yeah, it's a lot more fun when you have the mechanics, and the actual game mechanics are somewhat difficult, but you can get items that make it a little easier or improve the gameplay, because then that's almost a benefit to, oh, well, I have to get to this section, and maybe I'll go out of my way to get to a hidden area because I can make the game more enjoyable.
Absolutely.
Well, we're getting to the end on time here, but I do want to talk about your collection, because I've always been curious about that. I've heard about some people collecting games, but just a few questions. But when did you get started? Like, what prompted you to say, I want to actually start collecting these?
There's 2 answers for that. One, I grew up only child. So for me, it was I was an only child, but I moved a lot. So I moved between my mom's place and my grandparents' place. So for me, I never really had a connection to anywhere. So I always wanted to hold on to my stuff. That was my connection. So when I was a kid, that's where the collection came from, and that's why I held on to even games that I hated. I wouldn't get rid of. Luckily, I broke that habit because I had to, because I was broke. But I didn't really start collecting again until probably 2018.
Okay.
And it was a decision that I wasn't just going to buy things for the sake of buying things. I had gone through that. I used to collect toys as well. I mean, obviously I still got a bunch of stuff around me. You can see I still do, but I used to have thousands of, Star Wars action figures or GI Joe and things like that. And it was overwhelming. And it got to be not fun. It got to be a chore, where it was just like, oh, I've got to go to the store today to see if there's any new mint on card vintage collection Star Wars figures. I need to see if any of the 25th anniversary Joes are out. And that's not what it's about. They're toys. These are games. It's supposed to be fun. It's exactly what we just talked about. And I decided when I started buying games again, and I started kind of leaning back into retro gaming, because I had kept up with generational changes. But when I got back to saying, I want to start getting some of the retro games that I used to play, I really had to sit and look at it and say, do you want that game because it's valuable? Or do you want that game because you're going to play it? And in some cases, the answer is both. I want that game because it's valuable and because I'm going to play it because I love it. But at the same time, I'm on a limited income. I don't have a ton of money. I'm not going to go out and spend $3,000 on a complete in box copy of Earthbound for the SNES. I'm going to spend $100 on the SNES Mini that came out and just play it on there. That's good enough. That works. So I curate my collection now to only be things that I cared about or I care about currently. With the Switch, that's real easy because it's new and there's more availability for titles. So I can just go to the store and be like, yep, I wanted to get that. I wanted to get that. I wanted to get that. I'll pick up those games. With retro stuff, though, I am very, very notorious among my friends for going to a gaming convention and coming back with nothing.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, this just wasn't anything that caught my eye. And they're like, I spent $500 on this. I was like, I spent $6 on popcorn. There's nothing caught my eye. But then we'll go to something like my friend Chris, Game Dad. We went on a game hunt up to Grand Rapids a couple of months ago, and he got probably 5 or 6 things, and I ended up getting 30 different games. But it was stuff where it's like, I've always wanted to complete the NHL collection, and they're all $2, so I'm going to buy as many of them as I can right now. And it's like I got 15 to 20 games, but I spent $40. So it was like, so I tend to curate now, and I try to either only collect things that are things I'm going to enjoy playing again. I've never had the opportunity to play, and I found a good deal on it, and I want to give it a shot, or specifically physical copies of games that I worked on, because a lot of those were just lost to the wind. And that's, it's a trophy. It's one of those things where it took me, when I left, I didn't leave on the best terms. I was laid off. Me and 1,400 other people were laid off. And I felt kind of betrayed. And it's silly to look at it now because it's a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They don't give a damn about me. They didn't betray me at all.
You're just a number.
Sure, yeah, exactly. They're making sure their bottom line is fine. And I look at it, 15 years removed from the situation now, and I can appreciate it and understand it. I don't necessarily have to like it, but I can understand it at least. But it took me till this year to actually put up the plaques from the games that I worked on my wall. And it was just one of those things where it's like, I've had them in a pile next to my desk for years. And I was looking at them. I was like, yeah, you know what? I should be proud of what I did. I should celebrate the work, Exactly. And it was really cathartic to go through that. And I've got a shelf where I've got all my games up on them that I worked on. And it was like, that's really cool. It's really cool that I did that. So now it's like, well, now I need to get the physical copies of these games, these like 7 or 8 other games that I don't have anymore that I need to track down. So that's
like we're both writers, so whenever we get an anthology or something, like you want to put the print book on your shelf.
oh,
'Cause
absolutely.
Yeah.
that's your work and that's what you did.
Exactly
But
what I was gonna say.
yeah, but there was a question I always had about collectibles, and I never had anybody to really answer this for me.
Sure.
Especially when it comes to, like, let's say NES games, for instance. We're about 30, 40 years removed from the original NES games now. What do collectors do with the actual degradation of physical media? Because at some point they're just not going to work anymore. They're going to be non-functional.
Yeah.
So where's the value in it? What happens?
I have no idea.
It's like a scary thought, because even CDs are getting to the point where they're degrading, so you won't be able to use them.
Like, and I know with NES games that have a save battery, there's ways you can replace the battery and preserve the save. You just resolder it onto the board, so it's not a dead battery leaking battery acid all over your game. But I mean, honestly, like, it's there's cleaning kits and stuff that are sold that you can use to clean stuff up. There's different products that you can use to clean up the pins to make sure that they work. But for the most part, I think once it's dead, you're kind of done. Like, if you have the ability, you can reflow the solder to try to reconnect stuff, but like that's beyond my skill set.
Yeah.
I don't want to be near something that hot. I'm going to burn myself. Are you kidding me? Like, it's I think it's just at this point, you know, if you've got something that doesn't work, like I've got a couple games that don't work that I just have for shelf pieces, and they're cool to put on display. But yeah, just try to clean it as best you can and hope for the best. I think that's all you can really do.
That would just be my biggest fear in buying physical media, is that just one day it just doesn't work anymore. And then, like you said, it's just on your shelf now. I mean, you can still look at it, but you can't play it anymore, which kind of defeats the purpose of having the original games and the original systems.
It does. It's the double-edged sword, though, because you know, going digital only on anything, they can just say, no, we're not going to have that game on the store anymore, and it goes away. Like, I've had a few games on Steam like that where it's like, where the hell is this game? I spent $30 on it. Oh, we don't offer it anymore. I'm like,
want my money back.
Give it back. Like, it's but yeah, it's there's catches everywhere with this hobby, unfortunately.
Yeah, you can't really do much about it.
No.
What do you think is this is probably something you've talked about in your videos, but I can't remember. What's the most prized thing in your collection?
Can I give 2 answers?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So the most prized thing in my collection is I have 3 games that I have autographed from my test teams that I worked on.
Okay.
I have Henry Hatsworth and Puzzling Adventure, Tiger Woods PGA Tour 10 on the Wii, and Tiger Woods PGA Tour 10 on the Xbox 360. Those are the ones that they'll never go away. Those are things that are going to go with me to the grave, probably. But other than that, my favorite game of all time is Suikoden 2. It was a PS1 JRPG, and it's a valuable game. And I, unfortunately, a few years ago had to sell my copy just because we needed money. And you know, there's no shame in that. It's just one of those things that happens. But my friend Chris tracked me down a copy and got it for my birthday a couple years ago.
Oh, that's awesome.
And yeah, it was something that I had kind of accepted that I was never going to own again. And I was totally fine with it. You know, it's like one of those things is like, hey, it paid the electric bill that month, and I kept the heat on. That's okay. That's a good reason to sell a game. But to get it back was huge. Like, it sits on the shelf back there, and it's beautiful condition. Like, it's gorgeous.
So cool. Yeah, I love stories like that. I used to take guitar lessons when I was a kid, and my my teacher, he had this really unique Gibson Les Paul, and just to pay the bills, he had to sell it one day. And same thing, like his friends got together like a year later. Like, I think they tracked it down, and they just actually, I don't even think it was a year later. I think it was shortly after he sold it. His friends just felt so bad for him. They figured out who he sold it to, bought it back, and gave it back to him.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
So cool. I think he still used, and I'm sure he still uses it like in his office and for his lessons every day. It's really cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah. What last thing about collecting, what would you say to someone who wants to start a collection today?
Go into it with open eyes. Don't think you're going to be a completionist, because you're not going to be. Therein lies madness. If you think you're going to go in and get the entire NES set, you're a fool. Because unless you've got a secret stash of money somewhere where you can just buy the whole thing in one fell swoop, stadium events alone is over 20 grand now. Just don't do it. Just don't.
Do you think it's better to like have a narrow focus? So let's say my first collection is just gonna be, Nintendo Power. I'm just gonna get all the issues I can of Nintendo Power. Instead of having a grander scope, I'm gonna get the games and the books, and you just have too much, and then you have a very sporadic collection that's nothing's gonna be close to completion.
I think if you are determined to complete something, I think going one thing at a time is smart. Like you said, like saying, I'm going to get, like, if you are there for NES stuff, start with one aspect of it. Say, I'm going to collect all of NES, and the first thing I'm doing is I'm getting all the black box titles. I'm going to do everything from the first 2 years, and then we can go from there and see what I'm going to spread out from there. Or I'm going to collect all those issues of Nintendo Power that I wanted to collect. For me, collecting is part of the journey of being a fan of games. And there's no, I say don't do it, but there's nothing wrong with being a collector. There's something wrong with being a collector that just collects to not enjoy the thing you're collecting. Like if all you're doing is if all you're doing is collecting something to stick it on a shelf, why? Where's the joy in that? If the joy is the pursuit, then I would suggest find a different hobby.
I think some people do it almost as a competition. Like they have a buddy or somebody they know that wants this thing. They'll try to get it first just to say they have it, almost like for bragging rights. And I think that's, again, toxic. That's not a good way to go about it, in my opinion.
It can very much be a dick measuring contest.
Yeah.
And it's like, I've had people say, well, I have this. I'm like, I don't care.
That's why things get so expensive.
Yeah, exactly.
They cause the scarcity that might not even be there because people want to fight over something that's probably not even that valuable to begin with.
Yeah. It's like, I gave the example of Earthbound earlier. Earthbound isn't a rare game.
No.
You'll find Earthbound at every single convention you go to. But people have said it's a rare game. And people have said it repeatedly that it's a rare game. And if you say something often enough and loud enough, people will start to believe it. So the prices have gone through the roof. Now I can understand, the big box, complete in box version of Earthbound being more expensive. That's fine. I get that. But there's no reason the cartridge should be $600.
No.
That's like a $60 game. Like that's ridiculous. But as far as like the way I look at it, it's like I said, I curate the things I go for. Collect the things that you're going to enjoy, that you're going to have fun with. If, like I said, if you're just collecting to put it on a shelf, you're probably in the wrong hobby. There's probably something else you can do. Go get into fine art, be an art curator. Because holy crap, there's money to be made there. You're not going to find that in video games. It's just collect the things that bring you joy. And that's ultimately what the hobby's about, is doing something that makes you happy.
Exactly. Cool. Well, as we wind down, I just want to add something else I like about your channel is that I watch your review episodes, and I always appreciate that you review things that most people aren't commonly reviewing. Like, there aren't mass amounts of people reviewing some of the smaller games that you do, and it's like I'm learning about all these games that I would never have even looked at if you didn't talk about them. Like you mentioned that Ebenezer Scrooge one that looks really cool. I'm interested in that. Maybe next year for a Christmas episode. And there was like a language one that you talked about, and they, these things pop up in all your videos, and I just feel like you focus on both popular things and on less common things, and video games, and I appreciate that, because I think, for us as well, like it's like a balancing act where you want to talk about the things that people are going to be interested in, but you also want to talk about the things that piqued your interest and that you think other people should know about. And you have to balance that, because it's like you're kind of knowing that you might not get as much engagement with other ones. But I just appreciate that about your channel and just the way you talk about them, and just wanted to add that before we ended. But our last thing, I asked you to ahead of time think about a video game that makes you think of a book, or vice versa, and I'm curious what your answer is.
Sure. I've kind of briefly told this story on my channel in the past, but it's to flesh it out here a little bit more. So when I was younger, I grew up in Fall River, Massachusetts, and we had an incredible public library. I love libraries. I've loved libraries my entire life. It's one of the reasons I work in library software now. And the person who worked in the children's section actively listened to what the kids were interested in. Not just you should read the Hardy Boys, you should read Nancy Drew, you should read this. It was, oh, what kind of things do you like? What are you into? And I had told her that the things I was into, I really liked superheroes, and I really liked fantasy stuff. Like, I liked the stories of King Arthur, and I liked the stories of, kind of these high fantasy, just crazy ideas. And she said, I have an idea if you're willing to give it a try. It's based on very old stories, though. Do you think you'd be interested? And I said, probably not, but okay. And she handed me a copy of D'Aulaire's book of Greek mythology. And the thing that immediately captivated me was the stunning artwork in the book. Like, it was like every story was perfectly illustrated, and it was everything from the introduction of the Titans all the way through to the end, where the Greek gods disappeared and they became the constellations and things like that in the skies. And I was hooked. The second I sat down and read the book, I was absolutely hooked. And mythology became something that was mythology and folklore became something that was unbelievably important to me just in my everyday life. And it was something I was interested in, and I researched and I read about, and something I still do to this day, to the point where American folklore is now something I'm interested in, like cryptids like Bigfoot and the Hodag and stuff like that, where it's like, this is our version of Greek mythology. And I still love superheroes, which are modern day mythology. And it's something where it captivated me. And that love of Greek mythology led me to the Battle of Olympus, which is kind of like Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, but it takes place in ancient Greece. And you're going through and you're completing different trials, or basically the trials of Hercules and things like that. And it's a fascinating game that is one of my favorite memories from when I was a kid, one of my favorite games. And that's persisted to this day. And I know for a lot of people, they're going to think, oh, Greek mythology, God of War. Absolutely. The God of War PS4, PS5 games. I don't like God of War. It's never clicked for me. I don't care for Kratos as a protagonist. But one game that I love is, let's get that in frame, is Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I am an Assassin's Creed mark. I've been a mark for Assassin's Creed since the initial one debuted. I am kind of an apologist in that regard, because in my eyes, they can't really do any wrong, even though if I look at it objectively, I go, that game kind of sucked. I still love the concept and the core ideas of what Assassin's Creed does. And Odyssey took place in ancient Greece. You go all over Greece, like every city-state, every major town. You see the Parthenon, you see the statue of Zeus, like all this incredible stuff. And it just reignited that love of Greek mythology that I had when I was a kid. And it was something where, as I'm playing it, I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's what that is. That's what that means. And it was, it's not really a title so much as it is just kind of the concept of the shared story of Greek mythology was something that was really big to me. So
even if Assassin's Creed, like if one of the games isn't that good, just exploring the worlds, the ancient worlds, that does it for me.
Yep.
Like I get so excited just doing that. So I don't even care if the gameplay is the greatest. Like I just like the story and just being able to go, like you said, you get to see the statue of Zeus and all this cool shit that doesn't even exist anymore. Well, some of it doesn't exist anymore. And it's like I could do that all day.
Yeah, I loved it. There was and it was something, it was the other thing I love about that game. It was one that my wife really got into. So her favorite game of all time is Breath of the Wild. And she legitimately put in over 1,000 hours on that game, just going through every nook and cranny of that overworld and just exploring every possible aspect of that game. And then I introduced her to Assassin's Creed, and it was very much the same thing where she's like, I have to complete every quest. It's like, you're never going to finish the game, honey. But watching her play and explore and go through where I didn't have to be in combat mode or the natural reaction of fight or flight as you're playing a game. I could just sit back and watch and observe. It was so neat to go through and kind of remember like stuff I've researched and stuff I've read about as a kid. It was like, oh, that's where the original Olympics was. I think if I'm remembering correctly, that's where this next quest goes. And sure shit, you go and you're on the track and field area where the discus and the javelin stuff was, and it's like, oh, I love this. This is so cool.
That'd be a fun game to work on.
Oh God, yes, that would be. That's one of the things I would go back to the industry for. There's not much I would return for, but if they said, hey, we want you to lead QA efforts on a new Assassin's Creed, done. We want you to lead, and if Nintendo could call me tomorrow and say, we want you to be the janitor, and I'd be there. But it was, it's just a Greek mythology, man. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Great answers.
Thank you.
I always loved Assassin's Creed too. I played it up until the I forget which one it is, but it's the one where you play as a Native American.
That's AC3, and I love that game. I really think that is a very much underrated title that a lot of people kind of overlook because it falls between the Ezio trilogy, which everyone loves, and Black Flag, which everyone loves. And it's definitely kind of the little brother of those two games. Like it's not as good as AC2, it's not as good as AC4, but there's some really strong storytelling in that game. And it takes it to a place where it's putting you in revolutionary America. That's kind of fascinating because we're all sort of familiar with it, especially here in the States. Where we're like, I know that name. Like on some of them, you're like, I don't really know who Hippocrates is, but okay, I'll follow the quest path. But I know Ben Franklin. I know that name. Like here in the States, I know who that is. So I think
that was a fun game to explore as well, just because of the scenery and everything. Because it's like, oh, this is what our country used to look like.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I don't know if that was a game that fell. I'm not sure if it was. What was that? Did that come out at the time where it was like they were starting to transition to the next generation?
Yeah,
because
that was.
I think I didn't finish that game, and I think it's because it didn't run as well on PS3.
Yeah, I've got it on 360, and it doesn't run great.
Yeah,
and I do think that's one of those things where they were starting to try to kind of push the limits of what the systems were capable of, and unfortunately, they just couldn't get there.
Yeah, so that was my only. I think that's probably my only complaint about it, which isn't even like if I played it on something that could run it better, I'd probably go straight through it. But yeah, thanks for thinking of those answers. I love hearing what people say and people that actually understand the question. Yeah. I feel like a lot of times people are like, what do games and books have to do with each other? I don't understand. But
stories.
So much. It's the story. It's the story.
And if it's not the story in the game, it's the story behind the creators.
Yep.
And so I love it all. Stories are important.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much for coming, Jay. I've been so eager to talk to you, and this was a blast. I would be completely happy to talk to you again sometime in the future, and maybe I'll see you at an event.
I would love that, both to see you again and to be on the show again. This is a lot of fun, and I thank you guys for having me so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, thank you everybody for listening to Arcade Bookshop again. Thank you for being here, Jay. Everybody, be sure to watch Jay's YouTube channel, Square Pegs. Anything you'd like to plug before we sign off, Jay?
Just if you search me on YouTube, I am the Square Pegs without Sarah Jessica Parker. There was also a TV show.
A lot of videos,
TV show in the 80s called Square Pegs, which I had no idea about until about 2 years after I'd started the channel. And someone's like, "Oh, like Sarah Jessica Parker." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And so no, I am the one with the beard and not the one that is Sarah Jessica Parker. So
right. Okay, stay tuned every other Monday for regular episodes of Arcade Bookshop. If our last episode was about a video game, we can usually bet the next one will be about a book that game reminded us of. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you like listening to us shoot the shit about video games and books, please tell a friend to listen, because personal sharing is by far the best way for us to grow and continue putting out good content and increasing the quality of the show. Please remember to rate us 5 stars and leave us some reviews if you haven't already. You can follow us on Instagram at arcade_bookshop and TikTok and YouTube at Arcade Bookshop. If you have any game and book recommendations, you can DM us anywhere or email us at arcadebookshop@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your ideas. And Caleb, anything new with DPW?
Depending when this episode drops at the end of January, we have 2 guests coming on and possibly more guests in the future. A lot of different authors I will be interviewing. So yeah, check those out. You go to @DPW podcast. Just Google it. We come up on all kinds of stuff.
All right. Well, as always, don't forget, keep a controller in one hand and a book in the other.